This is a tough time for Britain. Over the last few weeks, 36 have been killed, over 200 injured in a series of terrorist attacks. We had an election that shocked the world after a radical communist really achieved his party's best results in terms of vote share in 16 years. And last week, a high-rise tower, Grenfell Tower, burned down in London, and it looks like the death toll is going to be somewhere around 80. Saturday was the Queen's official birthday, and she took the unusual step of issuing a brief message for the occasion. Today is traditionally a day of celebration, she wrote. This year, however, it is difficult to escape a very somber national mood. In recent months, the country has witnessed a succession of terrible tragedies. In the rest of the message, she expressed her hopes that the nation would unite and come together. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be happening. Here are 4 events of the week where Britain's division is on display. A man killed 1 and injured 10 outside a mosque in London. He used a rental van to mow down Muslims outside the mosque, and he shouted, "I'm going to kill all Muslims." It was a deplorable attack, but it's going to divide Britain and make it much harder to deal with the very real problem of radical Islam. Finsbury Park Mosque is the mosque where the attack took place, and the radical preacher Abu Hamza, he gave hate-filled messages there for years before being locked up on terrorism charges. If you want any more proof that Britain has huge problems with radical Islam, look at another event that took place yesterday. Around 1,000 people joined in the annual Al-Quds Day parade. This really is an anti-Israel celebration. It was begun by Iran back in 1979, and the crowd shouted things like, "Zionist, ISIS are the same, only difference is the name." There were Hezbollah flags everywhere. Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, he used to be a regular at these Al-Quds Day marches. He stayed away this year, but then he's also spent a lot of time with radical hate preachers in the Finsbury Park Mosque. So Britain has a huge problem with radical Islam, but after yesterday's attack, it's going to be even easier for the left, that just really doesn't want to deal with this problem at all, to shut down any steps to take care of it. So the nation's very divided over radical Islam. The second event to watch this division for, is the state opening of Parliament on Wednesday. This is the formal start of Parliament, where the Queen reads a speech prepared by the government, which outlines what the government aims to do during the Parliament. But it is a very divided Parliament. The Labour leadership hates the Conservatives, and they and many more in the press, they've done all they can to really try and brand this government with its support from the Democratic Unionist Party as somehow illegitimate because of some of the opinions the DUP holds, conveniently forgetting that the Labour Party has also tried to do deals with the Democratic Unionist Party in the past. And the third event to watch for is closely related to that, and that is the so-called Day of Rage. The far left has called for a day of rage on the same day as the state opening of Parliament, and the Grenfell Tower disaster has really stirred a huge amount of anger. And the far left is really taking advantage of that. A lot of that anger is misdirected. For example, the protesters stormed the local council office on Friday, and there they found a man who kind of looked important, he was wearing a suit, and they attacked him. Turns out he had nothing to do with the council, and actually he'd spent a lot of time in the last week volunteering to help take care of the victims. But that's the kind of anger now that's being directed at the government. And basically the narrative is that the government doesn't care about poor people, and so they ignored basic safety regulations. However, Britain handed over all powers of building regulations to the European Union. So if they want to be angry with someone, the EU would be a much better target. But they're not. Instead, Marxist groups are going to lead this day of rage in which they say they aim to shut down London and, quote, bring down the government. But this won't be the only day of rage. The Telegraph reported that left-wing groups are trying to get together with trade unions to have another day of protests on July 1st. John MacDonald, the Shadow Chancellor, has called for 1 million protesters to take to the streets. MacDonald's a Marxist. He's previously called for bringing down the government and destroying the system by any means necessary. Emboldened by the latest election result, he appears now to just be trying to do exactly that. Now, my final point of something to watch for from this week is actually a news event from today. Brexit negotiations finally kicked off this morning, a year after Britain voted to leave the European Union. Now, obviously, watch for bitter division between the EU and the UK. The EU, certain people within the EU have already issued a lot of angry words. But watch for division in Britain too. The nation is bitterly divided over what type of Brexit to have, with all kinds of arguments about hard Brexit, soft Brexit, single market, freedom of movement. In the climate of anger that we find ourselves, Brexit is just one more major bone of contention.